Hello, we are going to do just some quick C notes about Africa, and this is the introduction to Africa. What you'll need to write on is this document called Intro to Africa C Notes, and then I'm going to show you where to write as we go through this. Okay, so the point is just to learn some basic facts about Africa. So remember that Africa is a huge continent with lots of different people and different types of land. So we're just having a quick introduction. Okay, so we have to learn some basic facts. So the question is, how large is Africa? Africa is the world's second largest continent. So it's very, very, very big. Also, it's the world's second most populous continent. So if I look on the notes over here, it says you need to write the world's second largest continent. And then it's the world's second most populous continent. What that means is that there are so many people. Populous is connected to the word population. So it means like there's many people. In fact, there's over 1 billion people that live on the continent of Africa. So in this note, you need to write over 1 billion people. Now let's think and remember back to India. Do you remember how many people lived in India? It was about 1.3 billion people live in India. So that means the population of India is actually larger than the entire population of a whole continent. So that, to me, when I think about that, I think, wow, that means that the population of India is very, very large. Also, the population of Africa is very large, having 1 billion people in the continent. So you might be wondering, how many countries are in Africa? Now there's different answers because some places are trying to be a country, but they're not yet a country. So that's why in some videos it says, oh, there's 47 countries. This slideshow says there's 54 nations, 54 countries. So it's not like there's a clear answer. It's difficult to count all the countries because some of the countries are combining, some of them are splitting apart. So you should know that there's around 50. So the correct answer here would be 54. So there's about 54 nations and there's 7 territories. So territories is land that is not controlled by that country, it's controlled by another country. Now, I got kind of curious about that. So I was looking on the internet, like, what are the 7 territories? I wanted to show you what I found. What I found is a lot of the territories are islands. So for example, this is Madagascar. And then around it, there's lots of little islands, and those are called the French Southern and Antarctic lands, and it's controlled by France. Also, there's some islands here to the west of Africa, and those are St. Helena. I actually have a friend that just went to St. Helena before coronavirus, and those are owned by the British. Some other places are off to the northwest. There's some islands called the Canary Islands. Those are owned by Spain. And then there's more islands because you can see there's so much water that is around Africa. There's quite a lot of islands. This one, Madeira, is Portuguese. So lots of the European countries have claimed some of the islands. And that's why when we go to the notes, why it says there's 7 different territories. So that's why I wrote in the notes that most of the territories, it turns out, are islands. Good to know. Okay, the next part is about the people. So the question is, how many languages are there in Africa? Well, there's over 1,000 separate languages spoken in Africa. Many are related and can be grouped into language families. So on this map is trying to show that the languages here in West Africa are all blue, so those are similar. The languages that are green are similar. These languages that are pink are similar. And here's some examples. So in the notes I have examples. You could write maybe 2 or 3 different examples of different languages. There's one called Afrikaans, which is spoken in South Africa. Arabic. Arabic is spoken a lot in the north and also like the north east part of Africa, like Egypt, for example, has the main national language is Arabic. French. French is spoken a lot in West Africa. So French is common in West Africa, also in Central Africa. Portuguese from Portugal is spoken in a few places. Spanish is spoken in a few places, especially those islands that are owned by Spain. Swahili. Swahili is spoken a lot in East Africa or Central Africa. And then there's so many others, and we'll get a chance to explore some of the other languages. The final note is about different religions. So people in Africa have lots of different religions. You can't think like everyone has the same religion. There are two main religions and then many, many others. So on this map, I can see up here in the north, most people practice Islam. So they're Muslim in the north and in Eastern Africa. Parts of Ethiopia, but not all of Ethiopia. Parts of Eritrea, but not all of Eritrea. And so according to the notes, 45% of Africans are Muslims. So down here, my note says very religiously diverse. 45% are Muslim. About 40% are Christian. The Christian people in Africa tend to live in Central Africa and Southern Africa. Again, parts of, I can see Ethiopia here, parts of Kenya. So 40% are Christian. And then 15% have traditional languages, or traditional religions. And what that means is they have not been converted to Islam or Christianity. They have more of their indigenous or their native religions. Africa also includes minorities of Jewish and Hindu populations. We learned about the Hindu religion in the unit about India, and I don't know if you can see, but there's some islands way out to the west or to the east, and it's not on this map, but India is in this direction, and so there are some islands where Hinduism is practiced. Okay, now here's your job for today. We're going to try another Jamboard, and for the Jamboard, I want you to write 3 or 4 different questions that you have about Africa. So for example, let's look at the notes. If you want to write a who question, you could say like, let's see, like who, where, like, so who is, like about the people. So like, who are the Muslim people in Africa? Like, where do they live? Or if you want to know what question, you could, a lot of you for India were asking like, what is the economic resource of India? So you might, for this, want to say, what is Africa famous for? What do they export? Lots of where questions you could ask, like where do most people live in Africa? Where, which countries are most populated, are have the most people? Maybe like where, if you're thinking about animals, you could ask like where do the lions in Africa live, or where do the elephants live, if you want to know about different animals. If you're a history person, you could ask when, like when did some of the countries get founded, or when did they start? Or maybe when we heard there were some European languages like Spanish and French and Portuguese. So maybe like when did the Europeans come to Africa? You could ask why, like why are there the territories, or why are there so many countries? And then maybe how, like how did the history develop? How did people become Muslim or Christian? There's so many different questions that you could ask about Africa. I have a lot of questions. Every time I learn about Africa, I just leave having a lot of questions because it's such a huge place and interesting to learn about. So I'm asking you to write 3 or 4 questions on those post-it notes on the Jamboard. Give that a try, and I'm excited to see what your brain is thinking about for questions. Have a great day.